Good evening. Thanks for joining us on HorrorCast. I'm Misfit. I'm your host this evening. Joining us are our friends Sammy Bear. How are you today?
I'm very well. How about yourself?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you. Thanks for joining us. And CJ.
Yes, I am good as well.
That's good to know. We have a very special guest with us on this episode. Dauna Needsom, that's triple threat you are, aren't you? You're a medium, an author, ballroom dancer. No, I'm joking.
Podcaster as well, so.
Yes. How are you today?
I'm good.
It's good to know. So I guess with my questions, I guess they're probably really going to be the boring ones that you get asked all the time, but they always sort of fascinate me because, you know, everyone's different. Can you tell us about when you first discovered you had the ability to be a medium?
It was kind of a fluke. I was doing a house party reading tarot, and this girl that was sitting across from me, her dad came, you know, as I'm reading the cards, because I read intuitively, so I should start there. I read tarot intuitively. And I got this vision that her father wanted to talk to her. And I told her, I said, your dad wants to talk to you. She's like, well, I don't know how to do that. I'm like, well, you just need to sit down, be quiet, and do it. Nope, can't do it. And all during this reading, this man was just pestering me and saying, I need to talk. She needs to talk to me. I need to talk to her. We need to make this happen. And I'm just like trying to explain this to her. And she was adamant that she couldn't do it. So finally, after I was done with the cards, I just said, give me your hands. And I took her hands and I started getting all this information for her from him. And that was kind of the start of it. It was kind of a fluke. It wasn't something I intentionally did. Now, that being said, when my grandpa died back when I was a kid, I used to always feel him around. But I never really paid much attention to it. So.
And so you started off with tarots and sort of getting yourself familiar with spirituality and sort of fall into place.
For me, I mean, I grew up in New Orleans, and my mom used to go get her cards read. And when she was getting her cards read, I was left. She used to go to this place called Bottom of the Teacup in New Orleans. It's still there, but it's a lot different than it used to be. And I would get to look around and mess about and see what was going on in the place while she was getting her cards read. So that kind of attracted to me at the age of about 9 or 10. But you know, and at that point, I had already had some intuitive hits when I look back without realizing it. So it was just something that kind of, I guess, I was drawn to. And I mean, I make a joke of it because I was actually born on Friday the 13th in October. So it was just like, well, being in New Orleans, being born on Friday the 13th, this is not any big surprise. So, you know.
And your mum was obviously into spirituality as well, so
yes,
to
a certain extent. I mean, she wasn't hardcore about it. It was like her and her friend decided one day to go get their cards read, and then that became this thing they did at least once a year. And for me, it was just a curiosity factor, and knowing and having prophetic dreams and stuff like that. It kind of made you stop and think of what's going on. But as a kid, even with my mom, if she would have fostered it more, it would have been a better experience, but it was kind of like I had to figure this out on my own. So
that would have been really difficult, I can imagine as well. Because I was thinking about it earlier, and I think a lot of skeptics would say, "Hey, you know, when you decide to sort of put yourself out there to the world as a medium, you know, that there's a lot to gain, I guess, but there would be a lot to lose as well on a personal level." Did you were you hesitant about that at all? And how did all that come about?
There was an experience that, there's a TV show called Long Island Medium here in the States. And I've not really watched it, but, and I have other friends that are mediums, But I remember being at the gym once, and I'm changing. I had gone to the bathroom, and I'm changing into my swimsuit, and I hear this woman out in the back, talking to one of the other ladies, and she's talking about how she can't afford her father's tombstone. He passed a couple of months before, and she can't afford the tombstone. And I'm sitting there just minding my own business, getting dressed, and all of a sudden, here comes Pop saying, "Hey, no, go out there and tell her not to worry about that. It's just decoration. I don't need it. Just tell her it's a wasted expense. She can do it later on." And I'm thinking to myself, yeah, I'm going to go out there and make a fool out of myself in the ladies' locker room. And so after he wouldn't leave me alone, I was just like, okay, fine. So I walked out there. I'm like, "Excuse me, I know you don't know me," and I just felt like an idiot. And I'm like, "Look, I know this sounds weird, but your dad told me to tell you not to worry about the headstone. You can do it later. It's too much of an expense right now for you." And she's just looking at me like I am totally insane. And I'm like, all right, said what I had to say. I'm just like, I know that seems weird, but that's what he told me to tell you, and that's what I have for you. Sorry. Yeah, so if I get stuff like that, I usually don't really say anything anymore, because it's like I don't like being looked at like, "You're insane, lady." Even if you have the right information, they still look at you like you're mad. So
they're probably digesting it though. I guess it'll take a while, and they'll probably go get back home, sit down, and go, "Oh my god, that just happened."
It's possible. It's possible, but I'll never know.
I do kind of
It
find
happened
that.
to me once. I was getting my nails done, and this woman. Oh, sorry.
Oh, sorry. I was just gonna say I do kind of find it interesting how in horror movies, the person who's told something like, "Oh, your father said this to me," it's always they receive it very seriously, and they're like, "Wow, that's incredible. How did you know?" But that's not quite the case in reality.
Well, I've been watching Broadchurch, and there in the very first season, there's a psychic, and he approaches the police about information about the murder, and they're looking at him. Even though he gives one detective some information that he totally understands, they still basically say, "Get out of here, you're full of it."
Mm.
And that's really how I think people perceive it. It's not necessarily what you see on TV with the televised mediums. It's always, as Sammy said, this whole fact of, "Yeah, right, you're crazy, go away." So
Mm-hmm.
It's quite divisive, though, isn't it? I think people would either love you or hate you. It's such a personal thing, isn't it? And
it is. I mean, you can take this. It's what was interesting is I worked a fair once, and this is not related to mediums, but I was working a fair, and we had crystals out on the table, and being a tarot reader, we've had people protest saying it's the devil, blah blah blah, and there was I had crystals out on the table, and this lady walks over, and she has her nephew or grandson with her, and she's like, because the kid was fascinated with the crystals, and she's like, "Well, those are God's crystals." And I had never heard it put that way, but I thought to myself, okay, well, if that works for you, if that's what you believe, then that's what you believe. But it was very weird to hear that someone had to try to digest it in a way that was acceptable to them, to label it a certain way.
yeah. Christianity has those clauses built into it, though, doesn't it? To not worship false idols and not to stray from those particular paths. So,
here's something. Not sorry to interrupt.
No,
But talking about Christianity, there's a gentleman I interviewed, Christopher. I forget his last name, but I did a podcast with him. He's actually a neuroscientist. However, he also has studied the tarot and a bunch of other things, and he wrote a book called Tarot of the Revelations, and it's all about how the tarot is featured in the book of Revelations. And that I believe it was a bishop that worked closely with the Pope, actually wrote a book about the tarot and in a positive way. So the tarot is villainized many a times and it's not necessarily true. If that
Yeah.
makes
I think they
so.
do that with everything, though, don't they? So that you just don't stray from that path.
Well, I would agree, and I think a lot has to do with control. You
Oh,
know,
yeah. Yeah.
I
And,
mean,
and
go ahead.
yeah, just to stray outside that would be considered evil, you know.
Well, when I work, I live in a small town, but I was at this is the fair I was talking about being protested at. I mean, we had mediums there. I did medium work there, and we had tarot readers and other things of the metaphysical sense. And it was a small town. I would say maybe under 3,000 people. And somebody that decided to host this event had a massage therapy place in this old converted gym. It was a high school gymnasium that had been converted. So they decided that we were going to do this fair there. Well, the day before they came in, the town folk and the church came in and blessed the gym. Then we did it. Wait. Then we did it, and then they were outside with signs offering free water. And at the time, Angels and Demons, the movie, was out. So they were protesting with signs that said angels look demons, and that if you didn't go in, they'd give you a free bottle of water if you sat there and listened to them. And then after we left, they blessed the gym again.
Were they drinking holy water as well?
I don't think so, but here's the funny thing about this. So you would think I'm talking about something from the 1970s or 80s, maybe 90s. This was, I think, 2005.
Wow.
So not that long ago. So,
wow.
yeah. Yeah.
How does that make you feel? What sort of religion would you prescribe to most, if you do at all,
Well,
knowing what you know?
It's interesting for me because I was baptized Methodist. I went to a Catholic kindergarten. I went to a Lutheran school at one point during my junior high years. I went to a Catholic all-girl high school, and I had a Jewish stepfather. And I've studied Wicca. So really, I look at religion as this. Religion is your relationship with however you believe. If it's the universe, you believe in the universe. If it's the god and the goddess, you believe in that. It's something to me that I think organized religion is not really, and people can lash out at me for this, but organized religion is a lot about control. It's not necessarily about doing the right thing. If you feel that you can go to church on Sunday and be absolved from everything, awesome on you, but you're still not necessarily following the rules every other day of the week. So why not try to practice to be just a good human being?
Yeah, I do agree with that it's organized, because see, I'm a Christian, but I don't really believe in like the labels of religion. I see it more as a way of like, because I do believe that there's a God, and I just see it as a way of us being children of him. So I don't really fall under that label of religion, but that's me.
Kind of bouncing off
CJ,
of that.
I totally get what you're saying. Whoops, go ahead.
So kind of bouncing off of that, I was raised Christian, and the way that I always saw it was that there's a belief structure and a religious aspect, and people should, it's operating under a belief system is a lot, I don't know how to say words, but what religious ideals and it being like an organized thing, that's where people can go wrong, and like they don't really prescribe to that ideal. But like if you have a belief system and you just believe in the core ideals, but you don't follow along with the organization of it all, that's how it can be very personal, I think.
Yeah, that does make sense.
And that's kind of where I am, honestly. I mean, for me, religion is a personal thing. Do I pray? Sure. But I also see how the universe works. And I'm not saying I'm all-knowing, because I'm not. But what I'm getting at is I can see how something in your life that you went through, if you really pay attention, you can take those lessons and see how they transcribe to your current situation sometimes. And I think a lot of people miss that point, because they don't want to sit back and examine it. For religion, for example, it is, I think it's a personal thing, and yes, you should look at certain laws and certain things with respect. But my experience when I was going to church was that, you know, you have girls sitting there reading the Avon book in the hymnal. They're not there for the right purposes. They're there because they're being made to go there, and they're not really benefiting and getting something from that. If you feel the need to be connected to a group for the social aspect of church, then do it. But religion really is a personal choice, and I think that's what it needs to be for everybody, because I think we'd all be in a much better place if we weren't so judgmental about it and trying to force others to see our views. Sorry.
Yeah. I mean, it causes so many wars, doesn't it? It's
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah, it definitely does. It's a way of how you go about trying to bring people to understand like your views. You have to know a way to go about it so it's not as forcing, but just trying to almost like welcome them. Because yeah, like Misfit said, it's like a lot of wars and stuff. It's crazy.
Yeah. And here's the thing. What do you benefit by forcing this war to happen when all it is, when you think about it, if you want to go back to the commandments for a second, thou shalt not kill. But what is war?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah, I think that's the thing about some religions. I think there's this underlying insecurity, and they're just scared for people to use their own minds and think outside the box a little bit. So they just fear them into box them in so that they don't. So just in terms of being a medium, do you have sort of any feelings in regards to evil and, I guess, like God, and in terms of like a more positive spirit?
I do believe that, you know, for me personally, I have seen a friend that has been, I don't want to say taken over, because some of it I think was mental illness as well. But I had a friend who was channeling. She was doing channeling. She became an open channel. She took classes. She became an open channel. And then I watched her disintegrate, I hate to say it, into a very dark place where it got so bad that she thought wizards were after her and they were going to use her when she would, how do I explain this? They were using her for a sex cult, even though she was not being in this situation physically. She was saying mentally she was being attacked. And it got so bad that she didn't want to use her own toilet at her house because she thought the wizards would come up through the toilet. So is this mental illness? It's possibly, yes. But could there be an attachment? Yes. I mean, that's the weird thing about when you're messing with stuff that you don't know. Yes, there's people, just like in real life, we have people that are good and we have people that are not so good. And the same thing, if somebody crosses over into the other side, they're not immediately absolved of everything and they're not suddenly going to be a different person. They then become somebody that they will carry on unless they learn the errors of their ways. They're still going to have a dark spirit and they can still run amok. You know, that's what I've seen. And my friend, you know, ultimately I discussed this situation with a couple of people, and when I would read her cards, things that she was mentally saying were coming up in her cards, but the reality was not the same. So do I think there's a connection between spirit in this situation? Yes. Do I think there was some mental illness? Yes. But a spirit attaching to somebody can cause them to change personality. They can change and have different aspects of their personality become more negative. So it's a very slippery slope. It really is.
Did your friend get better?
My friend ended up they got to a point where I reached out and one of our other friends called the police, and she when they showed up at the door, because we were concerned about her, she said she was fine, and she acted like everything was normal. And the next time her and I went to lunch or dinner, it was lunch with my husband, she was very much all about the wizards coming to get her. And I then called the mental health clinic, and I sat down with her, and I told her, I said, I'm not saying that you don't have an attachment, but I think you need to get checked out. And she kept blowing that off. And finally, she called me one day, and she said, I'm moving, and I have not heard from her since. I don't know if she's alive, dead, or what. She cut off social media ties from everybody, and none of us know.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. I'm a nurse, and I've worked in mental health before, and we had a young girl, and she was talking about how she was seeing like flashes of imagery, and she looked them up. She just Googled them on her phone, and she said that they were Latin. And I remember just thinking, well, what would be wrong with just exploring that to see if there was something attached to her? Because if there was or there wasn't, mentally she just might feel better.
There's nothing wrong to exploring it. And one of my friends who was a medium, she was a medium since she was a little kid. Her parents tried to have her exorcised in the Catholic Church. They took her at 6 years old and had her exorcised, which was mortifying, and she really doesn't talk to her parents now. But I think some people, for some people, if you're doing this work and you just put yourself out there, and the whole talk about Ouija boards, and yes, the movie industry loves messing with Ouija boards, but unless you have really blessed a board, because I have worked with a spirit board before with a medium friend who made her own board and blessed it and consecrated it and made sure it was clean. Unless you really know what you're doing, I wouldn't advise doing it, because that's a portal that you're opening up for people, for things to come through and attach to you. And if you some people can actually tell when they have something attached to them. Others can't. When I look at my mom, ultimately down the line, I can see where there may have been an attachment on her besides some mental problems, because she got darker and darker. And while depression is a real thing, and I'm not saying it's not, sometimes if somebody suddenly switches gears and is a totally different person, then you really have to examine. And if you're seeing, like you said, flashes, that could be your intuition. It could be worth exploring to get clarity for, yes, is this a mental health problem or is this spiritual? Because the other thing about this is spiritual awakenings do show us flashes. Our intuition does kick in. So you have to look at things very clearly and try to maybe do a pro and con list and say, okay, is what I'm seeing something else that somebody else has saw? Or is this just, am I losing it because I'm under so much stress? I mean, when you think about being locked down now, as everybody has been locked down, at least for a little bit, and some people are still in lockdown, and some people are scared to be going back in lockdown, it starts playing mental games with you. So you have to make sure that your mental health is in check. So you have to look at what's going on, and are these thoughts real? Does that make sense?
Mm.
I guess.
No, so I just want did anyone, CJ or Sammy J, would you like to ask any questions?
No, I don't have any questions as of now. Right now, I'm just listening.
Well, I know it's fascinating, isn't it? I could listen to you talk all day.
Thanks.
Can I ask you, do you believe in reincarnation? Do you take any stock in that?
Yes. Yeah, I mean, there's too many stories of kids coming back and knowing things. And, my husband and I, he's now passed over. He passed over last year. But my husband and I, we had this connection that I have never been connected to somebody so much in my life. And we often talk about how we can, people can finish each other's sentences or whatever. my connection with my husband was so spooky that he would, I'd sit there and go, "Man, my knee is hurting." He's like, "Yeah, my knee is hurting. How'd you know?" And I'm like, and as soon as I would recognize and verbalize it, my knee would stop hurting, and I would have confirmation that it was his. We worked about 60 miles away from each other, and this was before we actually got married. And I'm sitting at my desk, and he had eye problems, but I didn't really know the extent of his eye problems. And I'm sitting there because we had just started dating, and I'm seeing this rainbow prism in my eye, and I'm like, "What the heck is this?" So I emailed him at the time, and I said, "Are you having eye problems today?" He's like, "Yeah, how do you know?" I said, "Are you seeing this?" He goes, "Yes." So to be that connected, I would say that him and I had, and I've had a reader tell me that, yes, we did share a past life, a couple of past lives. So I do believe in reincarnation. I think that's how karma comes about. That's how each life we have, we end up with a different lesson because something we did in the past, in our past life, has led us to this point to learn from it. And sometimes you can tell when somebody's a really old soul and somebody's not. So yeah, that's not exactly. Go ahead.
What about animals, though? What do you think happens with? Because I know they've got souls for sure.
I do. I know some people would say the contrary, that that's not the case, but I do believe animals reincarnate. And I do believe that animals, they hang around for a while because when we lost, we had a cat named Tada. He was a stray that just showed up, so we called him Tada. And after he passed at our old house, it was like you could see him occasionally walking down the hall. And I wasn't the only one. My husband's like, "Did you see Tada?" And I'm like, "Yeah." So, and even now, my husband, there are times when I feel him around me. And it's not just wishful thinking. I actually feel the physical presence. So,
when you see those kids on those shows, I remember seeing a docu series on it, and they just can't be lying. Like they just can't lie. Like they'd be no good at it, and you'd pick it straight away. And I find it really convincing.
Well, and the thing about it is, I think that all of us, until the age of 5 or 6, think about the bigger picture. And I'm sure you've seen stories and heard stories about, little Johnny seeing Grandpa that's passed over, or his little secret playmate. Until that age of 5 or 6, let's go back before we were handing kids phones and stuff. When kids were they didn't have a lot to distract them. So kids were able to just immerse themselves and look around and see what they could see. I have a friend who has a son that's 2 now, and she's a medium. And she's fostering that. And he's sitting there like, "Oh, I see this man," and he's describing him as a 2-year-old would. And she's like, "Oh, well, that's Grandpa such and such." So she's showing him and telling him how to expand his gift. Where most times when we are, like I said, hitting that age of 5 or 6, we start school, our parents are telling us, "You can't have that invisible playmate anymore. You can't see that. No, that's not right." So we're not fostering the ability to see those things as part of the universe. We're now shutting it down, saying, "No, you have to conform, and this is the way you have to be. You can't see that." Over my course as a tarot reader, I've watched tarot in the last 10, 15 years. It's more open, even though there's still some people that totally disrespect it. It's more acceptable now. So I'm hoping that as we go forward, that parents are more willing to let their kids explore those things. If they see them and they can describe it, and the parent recognizes, "Oh yeah, that's such and such." I think that's a better way for a kid to have acknowledgement of what they're seeing and maybe trusting their intuition and their instincts more.
I've said that to friends as well that have had kids, and there was one time when I think I just sort of asked, "Well, who is it?" And okay, well, ask them a question if they're there, standing there in the corner, but don't get too close.
I find that
Well, and that's the
fascinating
thing. I think
because
with questioning, Go ahead, Sammy.
I was just gonna say I find that fascinating because I remember when I was roughly 6 or 7, I would visit my grandmother all the time, and I would sit in the woods outside of her house, and I would always hear people like calling my name, and I just knew who it was, and my parents were like, "Oh, like, who are you talking to?" And I'd say, "Oh, Grandpa, who like died how many ever years ago," and it's just really fascinating hearing that this is a thing that happens.
It is, and I think the more that people embrace and accept it, I mean, when I used to have a shop in town here, and my husband had a sewing room there because he would make little bags, and my office was across the hall. So last year when I closed the shop, I remember the last room in there I cleaned out was his sewing room. And I stood there after it was empty, and I was crying. And I remember feeling him, because anytime I was upset, he would touch my back and rub my back. And I remember standing there in the doorway looking in and feeling him. Even though he wasn't there, I still felt him there. And I felt like he was rubbing my back and saying it was okay. And that was a really wild experience because you don't expect that. You don't expect to be able to have that feeling. And maybe, some detractors would say, well, it's just a memory. And that could be, but it felt real. So.
I have
And
a
it doesn't really
question.
matter if it, oh, sorry, guys, you're right.
I want to say, so like, seeing these things, what would you call like these things? Like, would they be like ghosts or spirits, and like what would be the difference between that?
I don't know that there really is a difference between ghosts and spirits. I mean, it goes back to labeling things, and a malevolent spirit or a ghost, aren't they kind of the same thing? I mean, what's the difference between a ghost and a spirit in your mind, CJ? Let me ask you, what do you think is the difference between a ghost and a spirit?
I guess I would say more of like a well, I don't really just at I guess I feel like spirits were more things um it's like I mean I don't it goes to me if if you believe in ghosts or not, and that was something I didn't really know. I always would say I do believe like in spirits and stuff like that, but I guess like for ghosts I just felt it was different.
I mean, for ghosts and spirits, I mean, the one thing you got to think about too is, since this is HorrorCast, how are they portrayed in movies? Ghosts and spirits are definitely, ghosts are more known to be notoriously bad, and spirits are more notoriously to be good and kind, and we have the Holy Spirit. But really, when you think about it, if you unpack it, is there really a difference between them? I mean, a spirit can haunt a house just as much as a ghost can.
Yeah, the role that there was one from what we see like on television and all this.
You're breaking up a little bit, CJ.
I thought that
Always
was my
great.
phone.
No.
Oh, sorry. The last was just saying, what, just I guess it just goes, like the road like there's a difference between them, like through television, I guess, and what we see. Like you said, with spirits are supposedly, more good, like of a good nature, and ghosts would be more of like an evil or darker nature. And I guess that was more of what we saw on TV.
Okay. And that's the thing. It's like if we sell you something saying that ghosts are bad, then one of the first movies I remember that my mom took me to was that made an impression because it was the 70s and there was full frontal male nudity in it, and that was Ghost Story. And this ghost had been wronged, and she was going after these guys who had done something to her. So we set up Ghost as being this vengeful thing, and I don't know that there really is a difference between ghosts and spirits. I mean, they're one and the same. Ghost, you're not going to see a ghost running around on a white sheet. How many times was that portrayed throughout the movies and throughout even cartoons and Scooby-Doo? How many times have you seen a ghost wearing a white sheet? It's Halloween decor.
Right. That's all the decorations are those, ghosts in white sheets and stuff.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, I think as going back to the writing aspect, I think as a writer, you want to take something, you want to create something that's going to connect emotionally with the audience. So if I can create a story that this ghost is just mean and terrible and out for vengeance, that's going to frighten you, because then you're going to look at your own world and go, okay, could this happen? Could this be real? Where
Right.
a spirit's going to be all nice and everything else. And the same is true with, let's talk about fairies for a second. Fairies are portrayed in most movies as being very nice and sweet, and we have Tinkerbell and all this. But then there are fairies that are portrayed as really dark. So you can take either or any of these metaphysical principles and skew them to bring horror to you, because you know why? The fact is, it's the unknown. And what is more, if you boil it all down, what is scarier than the unknown?
I can't believe that you were able to see a movie with full frontal nudity from a male in it. I think that's really cool.
Well, if you've seen Sex Life, that there's the prosthetic thing that now they say it's prosthetic, but at the time, I mean, here's the thing: I was pretty little too. I mean, I was maybe 11, I think. So I really should not have been going to this movie, because I didn't like scary movies to begin with, and you only see it very quickly, but still, it was at the time. I mean, this was very taboo. Very taboo.
Yeah.
It was the late. Go ahead.
Well, you really see it now, male front nudity.
Yeah.
And I even at the strippers, they don't do it.
No.
It's ridiculous. I don't know if it's true or not, but I think in some country that it's against the law to show a flaccid penis. And so I don't want to see an erect one either, but
Well, here's what you're saying is true. There's certain laws. Here's some really archaic laws. There's certain places in the United States where you cannot read cards. It's against the law. There's certain states in the United States where sodomy is against the law. So is there some place where you can't show? I'm sure, because sometimes these laws are on the books that never get removed, and people are doing things, but guess what?
Yeah, they don't enforce it, yeah.
And of course, if you want to talk male frontal nudity for a second, you can always get solicited in your DMs with those.
Yes.
Didn't ask for it, thanks. But anyway.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of something creative to do with mine. I know that the wall picture thing has been done and the coffee table book thing has been done, and I was thinking like a 1,000-piece puzzle of just dicks all over it,
A Christmas card.
Oh my God, I can see it now.
Or better yet, a New Year's card with something like along the lines of, "I hope next year's banging." So
Oh man, that's good. I like that.
you can
So
have it.
what sort of horror films do you like? I mean, do you like horror films or
I'm a
is
scaredy
it sort
cat.
of pardon?
I'm a scaredy cat. I used to get scared in I actually fessed this up to one of my friends just the other day. I used to be terrified as a kid of Scooby Doo. I remember.
Oh, what?
I think what ruined it for me was my parents were watching Alfred Hitchcock Presents in my bedroom when I was a kid, and it was. I guess I wasn't feeling good. I don't know, but they're in my room, all cramped around this little black and white TV, and it was raining outside and stormy. And on the screen is this casket that's flown, that's open and has fallen open, and there's a skeleton that's got hair and decaying, and it's raining in the scene and everything, and that just kind of put me off. Now Poltergeist. I saw in the theater with my mom, and it was a little scary. Back to the ghost thing. I saw it at the theater. I handled most of it. I couldn't watch the guy. I'm not going to spoil this, I'm sure, for anybody, when he peels his face off. Then that night, I went over to my dad's house. Oh, not that night, but a couple of months later, it was on cable, and we're at my dad's house, and he's like, oh, let's watch it, okay. Well, this time, the windows are open. It's storming outside. There's a tree hitting along the window. And I'm like, Dad, can we turn this off? I had already seen the movie, but now I am terrified of watching it because I can't deal with it. If it's a broad daylight sunny day, I could watch it, but no. I watch Scream. And as much as I say I don't like them, I've seen Blair Witch. However, Blair Witch I watched through my hands at the movie theater at a midnight show. So I can't say that I haven't watched them. Most of the time, if I am in that situation watching them, I'm watching them through my hands like a little kid, which is really ridiculous, I know. But there are some movies that I do like I believe there was a movie with Katie Holmes called The Gift. That was pretty interesting and pretty good. So if it's got a psychological component to it, I don't mind it so much. But there are certain movies that I've never watched. The Conjuring. I've never watched the Ouija board movies or Ouija. I've never, because they're not necessarily showing exactly what happens, and I think they're tempting people. Now, Final Destination, I have seen most of those. So,
Have you seen a film called Drag Me to Hell?
no. Sorry, nope.
No, it's pretty good. It's a pretty good film actually.
Is it?
But funny as well.
Okay.
This woman gets a curse put on her, and she gets a coin put on her hand, and she goes on this quest to get rid of this demon and return the coin.
Mhm.
And yeah, she doesn't end up well for her.
You know.
Have you seen the others? Have you seen that with Nicole Kidman?
Nicole Kidman? Yes, that was good. I liked that movie. I did. See, that's what I'm saying. There's some that I liked, and I'm not a big zombie fan. I really don't like zombie movies, but Zombieland, I like Zombieland. It was comedic. In Shaun of the Dead, I like that. If it's a serious zombie movie,
ones. Especially, I love the zombie films. Especially, I like the Walking Dead, the TV show. I really love that show. So.
yeah, as long as it's comedic, I'll watch it. My husband loved Walking Dead. No, I'll pass. Can't do
the
it.
Best interpretation of zombies to me, or at least the best looking.
He did not like World War Z, which had fast-moving zombies. His big thing was
Right.
He did not like fast-moving zombies.
I mean, I don't like that either. I don't feel zombies should be fast. But that's just, my personal preference, but I don't feel they should.
Yeah,
No, that's against the rules.
Yeah, I mean, how are you going to survive? I like vampires. I mean, vampires I do like.
Yeah.
I know I'm gonna once again dating myself. The original Fright Night is nothing like the current Fright Night, the most recent Fright Night. Totally two different movies. Same premise, but the graphics and everything. The first Fright Night is almost kind of funny. So, but it's good.
I'm somewhat
Sometimes the
the
graphics. Sorry. Go ahead, Sammy.
when it comes to horror movies, I very much appreciate the if I can tell that it's so obviously fake. So like, give me a pack of werewolves or something, and I'm totally all in for it because I love watching horror that I know is not actually a real thing. And I'm a big fan
Yeah.
of like special effects and prosthetics and stuff. So if I can, I I much prefer looking at the behind the scenes of like, ooh, how did they make those zombies like look like they're decaying, as opposed to like
Right.
realistic horror.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. I don't. I was more into horror that I knew that wasn't real and stuff like that, as opposed to stuff like The Conjuring and Poltergeist, or just more things like Possessing, where it's like more involved with demons and stuff, as to stuff like Jason and Michael Myers, where it was more just killers. I feel, or like slayers. But I've kind of grown out of that now. I was actually going on a Conjuring marathon, watching all the films in the universe of it. So yeah, I kind of just grew out of that phase. But yeah,
I was gonna say, Sammy, there, if you really like just camp, I would, or you appreciate more the prosthetics and stuff, and knowing it's not real. There's a couple movies from the '80s I would say check out. One is the original Fright Night, and then there is a movie called House with William Catt, and there was a sequel to it, and those were kind of fun. They were a little scary, but they were kind of fun, so it wasn't so bad, and I could tolerate those. So yeah. There was another movie I was thinking of, but oh well. Anyway.
So, Donna, tell us about what's your next adventure. Do you plan on writing any more books or coming to Australia or the UK?
I'd love to come to Australia or the UK. In fact, I got my passport last year, but right now everything's kind of on hold. I am currently in the second season of my podcast, which is the Better 2 podcast, and basically my podcast is all about exploring, taking you back to a moment in your life where you can look back and go, was it better to do something or not? It's been an interesting ride, that because everybody's got that Better 2 moment. And there was a woman, actually, she's in Australia, who she sees energy. And when she was a little kid, she had to tamp it down because people didn't understand how she could see energy. And so she had to learn how to be a normal kid so her parents wouldn't try. I mean, she went through an exorcism too, but they wouldn't try to ostracize her more. So it's been an interesting ride. I've talked to, like I said, the neuroscientist. I've also talked to people that have had addiction problems, and then I've talked to you may know him. He since you're in Australia, he won Make Me a Supermodel, Reese Ulrich. I talked to him about that contest and how he almost walked away from it. And I know that seems trivial, but it ultimately changed his life. So I have some that are very serious, the person who became an addict and almost lost his family, to something that's kind of whimsical. I mean, I talked to a male model the other day about, it's not as easy as it looks to be a male model. We all have these expectations. It goes back to what we perceive and what reality is. So that I'm working on. I have a bunch of shows lined up for that. So that a couple of musical guests coming up. So that's going to be exciting. I'm currently working on my next book is actually going to be split into 2 parts. It's kind of a saga. So the first book will come out in November, I'm hoping, and then the second part of the book will come out in early of next year, and then spring of next year there'll be another book. And they all kind of tie in together to my rock and roll saga of characters that play off the original books. So yeah.
I saw that. I thought when I was looking through your bio, I see that you're very eclectic in your likes, and I think you just sort of follow your heart and just go wherever it takes you.
Yeah, I mean, I've had some amazing experiences with that. you know, I've learned to trust my intuition more. My husband's motto was always go with the flow. And you'll appreciate this because I had taken an intuition class, and the teacher told me to take her astrology class because there was somebody in there I needed to meet. I'm like, yeah, okay, whatever. After her continuing to push me, I finally did, and I met this girl. And her and I started hanging out and becoming friends, and it turned out that my husband, or soon-to-be husband, um, was her was somebody she had dated in the past. So I had known him for about a year, and she's like, you need to read his cards. Actually, I hadn't known him yet. I think that was the first meeting. So I go to read his cards, and I tell him that some blonde's going to turn his world completely upside down. And he looks at me and goes, is that my ex-girlfriend? I'm like, I have no idea who that is. Well, fast forward a year later, and we are dating. So, yeah. And then we found out that we had a lot of things in common. Like I worked at Chuck E. Cheese, which I don't know if you know do you have Chuck E. Cheese over there, or?
No, we don't have it, but I watched enough TV to know what hamburger joint sort of thing.
It's a pizza joint, and I used to work at one down in the southern states. I worked in Louisiana, and he worked in one here in Illinois. And we had other things in common. Our school colors were the same, and we were two states apart, that like 900 miles apart. But yet we shared some really close experience. And the really kicker was, I worked down the street from him and didn't even know.
Wow.
So it was one of those things where back to, I think fate kind of made that happen. So, I mean, so I go with the flow. I try to, and even the podcast turned into something I wasn't expecting it to do. So I've had more intuitive hits and more things that just kind of nudge me along. And sometimes, it's right, and sometimes you don't. So, yeah.
So when you read your husband's cards, you didn't realize it was you?
No. I've had this happen twice. I dated somebody when I was in college, and I was reading his cards, and I was older than him, and I'm sitting there reading for him, and I'm like, yeah, there's an older woman that you're going to get involved with, blah, blah, blah. And then, 6 months later, we started dating. It's like, I don't read myself into people's cards. I mean, you don't do that. Because you don't expect it to be. And I didn't even, my husband at the time, I didn't fancy him. I didn't really think anything about him. And the first time he met me, I was going to a tarot party and was just in passing, so I didn't even really pay any attention. And he's like, it was New Year's Eve, and he looked at me, he says, he said hi and everything, and he told me later on, he's like, when I saw you, I thought, she's way out of my league. And I'm like, yeah, right. But it's, I think if you listen to your intuition, you can see who's supposed to be in your life, and you can get a better feel for them. And that it's a lot about trust. And sometimes we don't listen, and we talk ourselves into other situations that aren't necessarily healthy.
I think as you get older too, I think you get better at it. And I don't know whether that's just becoming more comfortable in your own skin, or just learning more experiences, or picking up on energies. I don't know.
I think that, and I also think that we don't have as much outside influences of our parents directing us, going, are you being silly? Get that out of your head. When I went to Live Aid, my friend and I knew we were going to win 3 days before we actually won. And, it was involving a whole contest and a certain number. I mean, there was odds against us. You had to be the first caller or the ninth caller. And this was when we had, you didn't have speed dial necessarily on your phone, and you had to count how many times they played a song. So it was for us to sit there and go, oh yeah, we're going, and knowing it at your core, it was kind of, looking back, it's kind of like, yeah, how did you know that? So you just got to try to believe and trust. So. But yeah.
It's a nice way to live life, isn't it? To believe in yourself. And
yeah, well, that being said, I'm going to say this, because I mean, yes, it's great to believe in yourself, but then there's still that time where you still second guess yourself. So I'm not perfect. I mean, there's still times where you're like, okay, am I doing the right thing? Especially now that the spouse is gone, and you're suddenly trying to rebuild your life. It's kind of like, all right, so what am I doing now? It's a different life after 16 years, you know?
I can't believe that you leave the house, really. It'd be like losing literally the other half of you. And I
It
think
is.
congratulations, you're doing really well. And,
Thanks.
um,
I guess I do want to say this. You had asked me what I was doing. So I'm sitting here talking about books. I should actually, if you're okay with that, give the name of my books. That way, if anybody wants to read.
yes.
My first book was My Days with the Dark Muse, and that is basically a bass player's journal. He is kind of a drug addicted guy who basically blows up his life completely. He is not the most nicest. It's kind of misogynistic. I hate to say it. I wrote it as a guy, and most people don't believe a woman wrote it. But it's a very dark, twisted tale. The other book, Love is Worth Waiting For, is a romantic suspense, and it's a second chance romance about a celebrity couple who the guy is a singer, she's an actress, and there's another actor involved, and some of the characters that are in that book play in part into the next book. And my books are set in the 80s and 90s, so there's some callback to how life was and things. You didn't have a cell phone, you didn't have the internet, so things were a little different. And the next book is Remember Who's Your Man, and that is set up between the character in the first book, the drugged out bass player, except at this point it's earlier in his life than what the first book is. And the girl that is in his book that ended up being his wife. So it's kind of how they meet and how they start their journey, and I tend to call my stuff realistic fiction. So while Love is Worth Waiting For has a happy ending, Days does not have a happy ending, and I don't guarantee happy endings in my books. So
That's really nice. Those really sound interesting. I like the stories, and I'd love to read those one day.
well, send me a message and I can make it happen.
Will do.
So any other
Excellent. Thank you.
Go ahead.
Sorry, Sammy, is there anything else you'd like to ask or?
I can't think of any questions right off the bat. No, I was just thinking about those books and the premises, and I did very quickly just look up what the plots were for those, and I think I'm definitely going to look into those more because those do sound really fascinating.
Thanks. Thank you.
Excellent. Well, we'll wrap it up, I think. Thank you so much for joining us. It was excellent talking to you.
Well, thank you for having me. I've enjoyed this conversation. It's been interesting, and I hope you enjoyed it as much as I have.
I did, and good best of luck with everything.
Thank you, and I
Excellent.
wish you guys.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
And thanks. We'll wish you much success on your podcast as well. So thanks for having me.
Thank you. Excellent. Well, thanks so much. And this is the final episode for season 3. But season 4 will be back soon.
Oh, can I
Thanks
say
for
one more
joining
thing?
us.
Can I say one more thing?
Absolutely.
If anybody wants to find me, they can look for me at www.dmneedom.com. Sorry for the self-plug, but I figured if anybody's curious, I should let them know.
No problem. We'll
So
we'll put that up where we can.
Thank you.
I don't know exactly how it works, but we'll definitely put all those details so that people can get a hold of it.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much. Take care.
You too.
And that's a wrap from us. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.